I'm trying to give a very, very broad perspective. In my talk, as I have suggested, I have not taken a particular region or dynasty or a period. So it stretches from early period to the late medieval. But as I understand, the early medieval period inscriptions has number of terms. When we examine, we come across many inscription. As our professor Divedi in his introduction mentioned, my talk, falls in for convenience and for easy understanding, and to give a wider approach to the subject I have taken. First, I would be speaking, or my presentation will be on the temple, how temple, and then the architectural terms associated with the temple, mandapas. Sometime, it forms part of the temple itself, and sometime you find in the precincts or in the adjacent area the mandapas and the sculptors and engravers. This is one, again, another important segment of my talk, architects and the repairs and conservation. That's again another very important aspect which we come across. There are number of inscription post-Gupta period, especially referring to the repairs and conservation undertaken at different point of time, and some other terms associated with the temple and its activity is also very much interesting. When I was gathering information, I thought I should touch upon certain, though in not detail, at least I should briefly touch upon certain aspects. And for the aspirants who want to pursue further research in this area, it will be a very good beginning for them to understand certain concepts, both, of course, found in North as well as in South India. The epigraphs occupy a paramount position as a primary source to understand our past, not only political history, but also cultural history. Epigraphs throws light on various aspects of cultural history. If we analyze and understand, perhaps there is no aspect which epigraphs doesn't touch upon. One such is art and architecture, and even fine arts too. Inscription belonging to various periods, belonging to different dynasties, written in various scripts and languages, refer to various terms which has a bearing on temple, art, architecture. There are many literary sources to understand the significance of many architectural terms which fairly belong to late period. But profound significance of epigraphs is that they provide us historical perspective from the earliest period to the late medieval period, though there are not many terms occurring in inscriptions. These days, multidisciplinary approach study is gaining ground, and epigraphical study cannot be seen in isolation. As the epigraphs are contemporary records, it denotes the earliest occurrence of certain terms which is not possible to understand through other sources. An examination of earliest records which has a bearing on the deities that were worshipped, religion that were followed, and the structures that were built to enshrine deities could be discerned through epigraphs. Mainly, its evolutionary trend also could be noticed. We come across in inscriptions various terms belonging to different periods which signifies temples and shrines. One of the earliest inscription which refers to a structure to enshrine a deity is the Goshendi Inscription of Sarvatata, belonging to late half of the first century BC, which state that the enclosure around the place of worship called Narayana Vataka was constructed for the supreme unconquerable lords Sankarshana and Vasudeva by the king Sarvatata. So, what I understand is significance lies in manifold. It is the first, many scholars consider it's one of the earliest Sanskrit inscription. But apart from mentioning the deity, if you look at from the architectural point of view, perhaps it signifies a single cell or an enclosure. So in the incipient beginning stage, you might find the beginning of the uh, art or the architecture as seen as reflected in this inscription. Perhaps we may take a thread from how the architecture or a single cell temple would have existed in the past. Was constructed for the Sankarshana and Vasudeva by the king Sarvatata. Another inscription of great significance is the Mathura or Mora well inscription of Shodasha, whose date is fixed around 10 to 25 Common Era, mentions that Shodasha, the Lord Mahakshatrapa, son of Mahakshatrapa Rajuvala, instilled the images of supreme five heroes. Who are the five heroes that are mentioned? Sankarshana, Vasudeva is Krishna, Pradyumna, Shamba, Aniruddha of Vrishni family. This is very important. Most of the early inscriptions are devoted to these deities when you examine the early phase of the Bhagavata cult and all. So it mentions a term, Shaila Deva Grihasthapitaha. Shaila, that is of stone, Deva Griha, a temple of stone was constructed and they installed these deities. So this is very important. The first one is the Goshendi inscription, and the next is Mora well inscription. These are from the north, perhaps the earliest inscriptions which refer to the structure, how it would have been, though in detail they don't give, but the concept of having a single cell or this one, a structure or an enclosure where they could construct and install the or consecrate the deity is known through this inscription. Similarly, when you come down south, though belonging to a little later period, is the uh, Mandakapattu inscription of early Pallava period of Mahendra Varman, dated 600 630 Common Era, refers to his unique rock cut temple, which state that this brickless, timberless, metalless, and mortarless mansion of Lakshita was caused to be made by King Vichitrachitta, that is the epithet which Mahendra Varman had, and dedicated to Brahma, Ishvara, and Vishnu. So perhaps this is one of the earliest where it refers to some of the term. So it means the tradition of the earliest tradition of the rocket temple, which Pallava started, is reflected in this. And there also, it also speaks, uh, there existed the temples which were made of brick, mortar, and other material. So these are some of the terms which we come across. Shaila Devagriha. Shaila is Shila, a stone temple. An inscription on a door jamb from Mathura belonging to the reign of Mahakshatrapa Shodasha of Mahasthana. It refers to the term Mahasthana. See, there are number of terms. It is not mere Devalaya or some term. We come across a different point of time and different inscription, different terms used to denote, to connote the name of the temple in different terms. Some are based on Prakrit, some Sanskritized form we find. So Shaila Deva Griha is one of the expressions we find, and Sthana. Sthana literally means a Deva Sthana or a temple. Sthana also stands for the temple. So I am not supporting each of the terms mentioned here by way of inscriptions. Will be a too vast subject to take all the references and give, but I'm giving the different terms that are found in the inscription at different period. Where some selected, I am giving epigraphical references, the king and the dynasty and all. But some of the terms you may note down here. Again, there is a term sthanaka. Sthanaka also stands for a temple, and sthanika, a shrine. Compare against the Mahasthana, a great temple. Sthanika, sthanaka, and sthanika stands for a smaller shrine. Interestingly, pushpaka. This is a very rare term that we come across. So some of the inscription which speaks about the temple, I will just bring to your notice. So as I mentioned, an inscription found on the door jamb from Mathura belonging to the reign of Mahakshatrapa Shodasha refers to Mahasthana. Mahasthana also stands for a great temple. For Bhagavat Vasudeva, the term Mahasthana is of course used in the sense of holy place also in a different context. A place called Kavika, a place renowned as popular place for jinas, but also a center for Brahminism mentioned in the Kambe plates of Govinda IV. So, Mahasthana is found in two different contexts, one as a great temple, another as a holy place, of course, which has a bearing with the Jainism. So, Kirtana, this is also commonly, not though very commonly found, we have an expression called Kirtana, a temple or anything, that brings fame, Kirti. From Kirti, the term Kirtana has come. Normally, when a king or his general or some chieftain erects or constructs a temple, it speaks of his popularity, Kirti. So that's how the term Kirtana, which stands for a temple, uh, to uh, give a popularity to the particular person who has raised the structure, constructed a temple, is known. Kirtana occurs in Ranipur Jharial inscription on calligraphical grounds assigned to 10th century Common Era, which mentions Kirtiresha Pratikirtita. See that Sanskrit inscription, Kirtiresha, for the popularity, Kirtiresha Pratikirtita. The word Kirtana, the same as Kirtana or Kirti, often used to indicate an image. Sometimes it also stands for image, a temple, or a grant. So generally, it is meant that which gives the popularity of the makes a person famous. Normally, in those days when they constructed a temple, it used to give the popularity or fame of a person. Another very commonly, though not Devagriha. See, Devagriha, an inscription, again, it is found on a door jamb from Mathura, mentions Devagriha, which is said to have been adorned with the images of Panchavira. I told already who are the five, the great heroes belonging to Vrishni dynasty, and again this belonged to the Shodasha, King Shodasha. So this particular inscription has the term Devagriha Karitam. So to enshrine the five important or the Vedas of Vrishni dynasty. So Dharmasthana. See, these are the different terms, perhaps most of you might not have listened or in the terms, that are found in the later literature, you may not come across such terms, what we are or what we are seeing through epigraphs. So again, we have a term called Dharmasthana, which again stands for a temple. We find a mention of the term Dharmasthana in the copperplate charter of Pravarasena, the Vakataka card. It mentions Dharmasthana Vaijayike, that is from the Vaijayike Dharmasthane, the victorious camp, from that religious worship where worship is conducted, Dharmasthane, for the increase of religious merit. For the instance, another inscription in Narvar dated Vikrama 1355, which refers to Dharmasthana as a sacred place. So it may be a temple or a place where some sacred activities were conducted, but this is also interpreted or taken. Dharmasthana stands for a temple. Another term is Devakulika. There is another interesting term, Devakula. Devakula for a temple, Devakulika for a smaller shrine. There is another interesting term, Devakula, which stands for temple. The Sonepur plates of Mahavdhav Gupta, a Janamaji of Somavamshi dynasty, is an important record. The charter record that a certain Kamalavana Vanikisthana, that is Kamalavana Merchants Association, a guild, a guild. They used to do a lot of benefactions. So they did, register a grant to Sri Keshava Bhattaraka Devakula. They did the grant, that is, you find the name for the Lord Keshava. They built a temple, it is called Devakula. And Sri Aditya Bhattaraka, that is for sun. They constructed two temples, one for Keshava, another for Aditya, sun god. Both are called Devakula. Here you find the expression Devakula for these two temples, Vishnu and Surya for differing expenses. They made some benefit, costs of offering to the deities, and further for the repairs to be done for these shrines also they gave certain benefactions. Another record which is quite unique is in respect of mentioning many terms which has bearing on temple, art and architecture is from Tandikonda grant of Amaraja. This is very, very important. If you go through the entire, the article, perhaps, you find many terms that are connected with the temple and art, architecture, and other activities. And this belonged to the Eastern Chalukya king, Ammaraja the second. His date is given as 945 to 770 Common Era. Mentioned that a certain Prabhuta Rashi, This is, in fact, when you read, it speaks a lot about the Kalamukas and Pashupatas and all. So it mentions a certain Prabhu Tarashi III, and under the direction of his guru, he built a Devakula. Again, it mentions Devakula and a Matha consisting 3 stories. It also refers the structure consisted of 3 stories, and it also further mentioned the structure was beautified with colored paintings, a rare occurrence rather, even the painting. These are all occurs in this particular inscription. It's very, very important. And another very commonly met with expression is Devalaya. Even now, for a temple, we commonly say we go to temple, Devalaya. It's a commonly found expression. The above mentioned inscription. So I told, this is a very, very important inscription which has many terms connected with the temple, and it also mentions Devalaya. The above mentioned inscription also mentions Devalaya temple in connection with restoration work. Though I am going to deal at a later part about the renovation and restorations, some specific inscription which it refers, and also Devayatana. See, another term is Deva Ayatana. Devayatana, a temple as Devakula. We find Devayatana, the same as Devakula. Perhaps this is a unique record wherein in one charter we find reference to terms which stands to mean temple, Devayatana, Devakula, and Devalaya. So, in a single inscription in different contexts, when you go through, you will find under different descriptions, all these terms we come across in this particular inscription. Another is Pushpaka. This is a very rare, perhaps, reference, which, while editing the inscription, Professor V.B. Mirashi has brought to our notice. Pushpaka also stands for a temple. The very interesting and uncommon term is Pushpaka, the carved stone inscription of Ratnadeva III, dated year 933, common, its equivalent is 1182 common era. The records state that in the famous Ratnapura, he built a beautiful mandapa resembling a pushpaka. Of course, here it is rendered as a pushpaka on the top of a hill in the west. In this period, Pushpaka is considered as a temple, and Professor V.B. Mirashi has drawn our attention to the work where P.K. Acharya in his Indian architecture, has referred, and you may access for further details or explanation regarding this term. What I understand, when even the stellar shape a temple, which we Hoysala temples are very much known, it gives like a full-blown lotus when you see a star-shaped temple. If it is seen from the top, from perhaps it may give the resemblance of a pushpaka flower, full-blown flower, which is perhaps they also gave a term pushpaka, which stands for the temple that is found in the Kalachuri, Ratnadeva's third inscription. And coming to this, though I am not concentrating much on the Jina and Buddhist, we find Jina Bhavana, Jinalaya in some of the inscription. In addition to the above terms, we find reference to Jina Bhavana, the Masulipatam place of Amaraja of Eastern Chalukya dynasty, refers to the construction of 2 Jina temples, Jina Bhavana in this. again is Vihara, which most of you know. Another commonly met with term is Vihara. The copper plate inscription of Dhruva, Rashtrakuta, Shaka, dated Shaka 806, records the grant of a village to the Buddhist Vihara of Kampilya. The fragmentary inscription of Dholka referred to a certain Udayana Vihara built by the minister Vagbhata. So, this in general, uh, different terms, Devali also stands for a temple, Devagriha, Devakula, Devakuli, Devakulika, a supplementary or a small shrine, Devalaya, Devayatana, Dharmasthana, Bhavana. So these are nearly a dozen terms, which stands for the various the terms which are associated with the temple. So this epigraphs, affords us to know different terms connected with the temple itself. So there is a inscription Vishnu Griha. Vishnu, the inscription itself mentions Vishnu Griha, a temple, Vishnu temple, Griha. See, the Griha is taken in the sense of temple where Vishnu image is enshrined. And Sri Paschima Mandira. This, we get Tamil Tirumur Koil in Sri Paschima Mandira. The equivalent in Tamil is Tirumir Koil, Tirumir Koil, sacred temple in the west. Normally, when you look, they say a Vishnu temple situated in the west side of the village. So, see, we got Paschima Mandira in Tamil, Tirumir Koil. It's Jina Bhavana, already referred, and Jina Nagara, uh, Sinakaram, a Jaina temple. Vasahi, also a corrupt form Sanskrit, Vasati, Basadi, we find, and Vihara, more commonly we know as a Buddhist monastery or temple. So here I have not touched upon many, though here and there, certain terms connected with Buddhism or Buddha and the Jain temples also mentioning. So next we come to the another important segment of our study, the architectural terms associated with the temple. We get many such expressions as Antarala Mandapa, a portion of a temple connecting the Garbhagriha and Mukhamandapa. This what is we have that expression Agra Prasada, that is also Mukhamandapa, Agra Prasada, which is in front of the temple, Agra Shala, Agra Mandapa, probably used in the sense of Mukhamandapa. So these are the what are all I am mentioning, trying to highlight here. They are all found in inscription, but I am unable to connect every term with inscription. But please make a note of it. All these terms which I am showing here, they all connected and they are found in the temple. I couldn't access all the epigraph publications to connect it, but some explanations also I am connecting, trying to give. For example, Vimana, an examination of some of the inscription belonging to different periods reveals certain terms connected with architecture. One of the popular term is Vimana. Everyone knows. Though I am not a very serious student of art architecture, but I have tried to understand some of the basic concepts connected with the architecture. A detailed study I have not made. As mentioned above, Tandikonda, which again, earlier I referred, Tandaikonda grant of Ammaraja. It seems to be quite significant as far as occurrence of many architectural terms. Here again, this inscription has the term Vimana. Vimana is also used in the card, which signifies shrines. Shrine is also called Vimana because Vimana. Another is Antarala. Most of you might have heard very famous inscription. The Sintra Prashasti of the reign of Sarangadeva is a unique record as it provides a lot of information about the temple activities, especially verses 40 to 46. When you examine, there are a lot of information given. One should go through this. Sintra Prasasti is very unique. It refers to setting up of five images. Five images. The first one is Gorakshaka, that is Gorakhnath, Bhairava, Anjaneya, Saraswati, and Siddhivinayaka. These are the names of the deities mentioned in the inscription, and they were placed in the antaralas of five temples. This is what the inscription says. All these five, the deities, were kept placed in the antarala of the five temples. Another term which we come across is Kumbha. Kumbha, another popular term met with in inscription is Kumbha. The Chebrolu inscription of Jaya, a chieftain of Kakatiya, Ganapati, of dated Shaka 1153. It states that Jaya got repaired and whitewashed all the temples, Prasada. Yes, Prasada is another very popularly met with inscription. Devalaya, Prasada, at least when I examined many inscriptions, the term Prasada Karitam, that's a very commonly met with expression as far as temple is concerned. Prasada. Prasada is a structure. So sometime we take it for the secular purpose. So sometime also as a religious. Prasada is a temple in that holy city and placed golden pelican. That's what we find in the inscription. It mentions Kalasha. Kumbha or Kalasha is placed as a pinnacle. Kalasha also is referred to in this record on them. Further, it's very interesting. It states that he built an enclosure, prakara, enclosure, and a mandapa for devoted to deity or one of the graha, Saturn, Shani. He set up Shani image. And later it says a gopura of 3 stories. A gopura of 3 stories were constructed. At the end of the description, it says he set up a linga, Moolasthana. And the Moolasthana, which I earlier referred, also stands for a temple, Moolasthana, temple. And the linga called Kadavitteshwara. It mentions Kadavitteshwara, which was earlier destroyed by robbers. So this is what the inscription says is very, very important as far as to understand the different terms connected with the temple. Another expression which I came across is Jali. Jali perhaps is a perforated window which we see in many of the Hoysala temples and many such, but we don't get the epigraphical references for that. But here is an inscription. Among many architectural terms, another fascinating term is Jali, the Ahmedabad inscription of Visaladeva, dated somewhat 1308, records the gift of trellis window, that is perforated window or screen Jali in the temple of Uttareshwara at Mahimsaka by a Pethoda, that is named a servant of Sodhala Devi, the queen. So, this particular inscription refers to Jali of the temple. And another expression is Jagati. Most of you might have read or heard the Siadoni inscription. We've come across the word Jagati is used in the sense of a kind of building. The term is also popularly used in the sense of lower ground or compound. So we get the term Jagati perhaps maybe in a different context, but we find this sometime, the connotation, the meaning varies from period to period. That's why a little detailed study of this architectural terms occurring in different inscriptions, we can try to see how the particular term might have changed in course of time to assume a different sense and meaning. And I would like to again draw your attention to one of the very important is Panchayatana. Most of you have heard or sessions you might have known Panchayatana temple. One of the Kalachuri inscription mentions that a certain Vapula, a brave general of Karna, again a Kalachuri inscription, who had distinguished himself in several battles, built a temple of the Panchayatana. While giving it, it mentions it's a very unique inscription, I should say, in which time central shrine was surrounded by four small Devakulikas, the one main shrine and surrounded by Devakulis. So this is the Panchayatana temple mentioned in one of the Kalachuri inscription. And Torana. There are many inscriptions, especially in the Buddhist inscription we find, especially from the epigraphical point of view, there are many reference to the construction of Torana, erection of Torana in the Buddhist inscription. Again, we have got in the early records, Kumbhaka, Mathura Buddhist inscription belonging to the reign of Huvishka, records the dedication of a base of pillar 25 number to a vihara. So Kumbhaka is the base, the pillar that is mentioned. And another very important aspect is, of course, it has its own Jaina connotation, is Khattaka. Khattaka is a term which is associated here, the Jaina temple. The Jaina inscription template of Neminatha of Mount Abu. I think most of you might have seen Mount Abu, one of the beautiful creation, has two architectural terms in that inscription, which are quite interesting. One is Balanaka, which occurs in line 37, and Khattaka in line 40. The former term is identical with the Marathi term Balani, means a raised wall, raised along the wall, a raised wall of the Gabhara or Sabha Mandapa of a temple. And the Kataka, judging from the context, Luder says it may means a pedestal and throne. So this very interesting term when you examine the architecture connected with the Jaina shrine or temple. Further, the interesting part is the inscription gives a description of the temple is quite beautiful, and it as follows: the temple built of white marble was provided a lofty mandapa in the front with 52 shrines for the Jainas on the sides of it. and Balanaka or stone seat in front of is also mentioned. So this uh, inscription from Mount Abu found in Neminatha shrine is quite interesting. It's a very quite long record, beautifully engraved, has a portion, a part of contains the description of the temple also. So let me rush through this Kumbhaka again, which I have given in my description. The base of a pillar, Kattaka. Also, we find the expression in Kannada here, a pedestal or seat, a niche, a term found in Jain inscription. Jali, a trellis window. Jagati, Devagriha, Deva Jagati, Tamil Jagati Padai. And we also find the term Vedi, a seat, also a raised platform. Vedika, a raised platform. Sukhanasa. Of course, we have the term, but we don't find no specific occurrence in inscription, but it's a very interesting term. And Ranga Mandapa, the inner hall of a temple, same as Tamil, Tiruvarangam. We There are many such terms, we find in Tamil and Chola uh, inscriptions. And Sabha Mandapa, main hall in a shrine, hall in front of a shrine. This we do get in the inscriptions is very interesting. Vimana, pinnacle or upper structure over the sanctum of a temple, the central shrine of a temple, also called Sri Vimana. In Tamil, they call it Sri Vimana, same as Garbhagriha, a steeple tower over a shrine, also called Stupi, and Upana, the first molding above the plinth in construction of the temple. This also we come across in inscription, but I couldn't access many of the source to give a little more historical perspective to these things. But I'm just trying to give the terms. And Torana, an archway, an arch or gateway, an arched door, a portal is called Torana, which we come across. And Sabha Mandapa is same as Ranga Mandapa. Panchayatana, which I just gave a bit of a description, a type consisting of 5 rooms, a 5 shrine temple. And we also come across this term Parivaralaya, small shrines, surrounding the main temple, Parivar, surrounding veranda of a temple where small deities are enshrined, and Mahamandapa, again a large pillared hall next to Ardhamandapa. We get this Mahamandapa, Ardhamandapa in a temple also called Mukhamandapa. So these some of the terms uh, uh, connected with the architectural terms, we find in the inscription. And the Kama Koshta, this is again Kama Kotam, that is what we find in Tamil, a shrine of the goddess of Parvati. Kama Koshta is a term which you find in inscription, which stands for a shrine dedicated to goddess Parvati as an adjunct of the Shiva temple in the same compound. And normally we find the Pushkarini adjacent to a temple. This also we find Deva Pushkarini, temple water tanks. And Prakara, this also we have a wall enclosure around the temple Prakara, or also we call it the circumambulatory path around the temple. Makara Torana, an ornamental arch, an arch in the shape of Makara, gateway with figures of crocodile. Makara Torana, this also we find this expression in the inscriptions. So mandapa in inscription is another very important aspect. As I told earlier, a mandapa may be just connected with the temple, or there are certain mandapas which are little away from the main shrine or in the same precincts. If it is this one, there is a mention in a Tamil inscription, Abhisheka Mandapa, Tirumanjana Shalai, Tirumanjana, that is consecrated, the deity is given a holy bath, Abhisheka Mandapa, Abhyavahara Mandapa. See, this is perhaps, these are the adjuncts of a temple, a dining hall. We find a separate uh, hall made, for distribute Mahaprasadam. So, Abhyavahara Mandapa, Agra Mandapa, again, which forms a part of the temple, main Mandapa, Antarala Mandapa also, we have such expression, and Yaga Mandapa, Yajnashala, a sacrificial hall which is just close to the temple, maybe within the temple premises or just in the same. Another very interesting is Vasanta Mandapa we come across in inscription. Mandapa in the midst of a pleasure garden where the spring festival of a deity is celebrated. This also very interesting. Vasanta Mandapa, a mandapa in the midst of a pleasure garden where the spring festival of a deity is celebrated. Sabha Mandapa, same as Ranga Mandapa. We have an expression called Shenivara Mandapa, the name of a building structure attached to a temple, apparently meant for some function held there on Saturdays, Shenivara. So the mandapa is also called on the weekday. Shenivara Mandapa, name of a building attached to a temple, apparently meant for some function held on Saturdays. Vaikaniku Mandapa, I'm not very clear. And we have an expression Paniya Chaya Mandapa, probably a shaded hall cooled by water. So these are all the sub parts, function were attached to the temple. And I wish to state, here you may notice below just the below the sculptures, especially in the Hoysala temple and many other, the names of the sculptors and engravers occur. It's a very important aspect. For example, the Siedoni and the Sasbahu inscription refer to Shilakuta. Shilakuta is Shilakutta, a stone cutter. Uh, See, we can make two categories: one, the sculptors, the engravers, and the architects who are responsible for the construction of the temple. So I could pick up very few terms here from the based on epigraph. So Siyadevani and Sasbahu inscription refer to Silakutta. There is a commonly, perhaps at the end of the record, especially with regard to the engraver, the stone inscription, if it is a huge prashasti, the copper plate charter, we find normally the name of the engraver is mentioned. Here, the Mudhol plates of Pugavarman, it is dated 6th century Common Era. Uh, mentioned that Shilpakara mentioned. It grants to a Kayastha lineage, it seems that he takes pride in mentioning that he belonged to the lineage of Kashyapa lineage, rather than mentioning the name of his predecessor. So, Shilpakara is the word which we come across in the Mudhol plates of Pugavarman. Again, Sutra Bhrut, Burundi inscription of Vikrama 1336 is quite interesting, and it introduces a new expression, Sutra Bhrit. We have got Sutra Dhara, but this Eckhart uh, uses a term Sutra Bhrit, which is equivalent to Sutra Dhara, and it is preserved in Gwalior Museum, this particular inscription. And another inscription, the Western Chalukya Vikramaditya the sixth, refers to Ruvari. This is a very common, we get such a name, Ruvari, which is also Tadbhava, the correction, Rupakarin. In Kannada, or we call it Ruvari, Rupakarin, a maker of image or sculptor, Rupakarin is the term. So Utkirna is the term we get for Udghatita. Udghatita is engraved. Ghatita also stands. These are the different terms, terms found in epigraphs. Ullekha likita, again engraved. Ullekhaga, Sanskrit Ullekhaka. Ullekhaga, it is the Sanskrit form. Ullekhaka is engraver. Shailakuta or Shailakuta, a stone cutter. Shilpin, this also term we come across in inscription. And Shilpakara, Sthapati. Sthapati, a mason or architect. Sthapati Samraj, it's a epithet given, chief of architect. Sthapati Samraj. And Gajadhara, perhaps a little unknown expression as far as he is also same as Sutradhara. Because of positive, I am unable to take all the epigraphical references that occur in different inscription, but all these terms which I am trying to show here they are found in inscriptions. Sutrabhrut, same as Sutradhara, a mason or a artisan. Sutradhara Pitamaha, again you see beauty. See, the very Brahman among the masons, this is again a title found in one of the inscription is called Sutradhara Pitamaha. Rupa Daksha. We have Lupa Daksha, which we find in Jogimara inscription, one of the earlier where he mentioned as Lupa Dakha, the Prakrit form. When you Sanskritize Rupa Daksha, is also called a painter or a sculptor. Rupakara, again a sculptor. Rupakarin, Rupakarman, a person who does carving. Rupakara is a sculptor. Rupakarin, carving. Lekhanadhyaksha. This again an official, the superintendent of the writing of documents. Lekhana Adhyaksha. Lekhana Adhyaksha. Lepyakara is a very interesting, a model maker, a person who makes model. Lipikara, a scribe or a writer. Karmantika, a person who supervises the work. These all official, some of the designations. Karmantika, a person who supervises the construction of a temple or a shrine, who is involved in that is called Karmantika. When coming to the architects, some of the terms, which we come across is a Taksha Acharya, stone mason of a temple, Taksha. Shaila Karman, a person who work on stone. Shaila Vardhakin, Sela Vadaki, that is what we call in Prakrit. When we Sanskrit rise, it become Shaila Vardhakin. Talata, Salavata, a stone cutter, a mason. Shila Karmanta, a stonework. Shila Rupa Karman, Sela Vadaki. Sutradhar. Sutra, as an abbreviation, we find which stands for Sutradhara. So we are coming to the another very important aspect, repairs and conservation. See, it's not merely constructed. There are many early epigraphs which talk or which speaks about the conservation or repairs to be carried out. They are recorded very much. So the concept is something, they didn't just construct and leave. They were also very, concerned about the periodical, the conservation or the repairs to be carried out to the temple again and again. We have a quite number of references in epigraphs regarding repairs and conservation. Dongargaon stone inscription of Jagadeva, again dated Shaka 1035, records Jirnodhara. This is what very important expression. Jirnodhara of a temple dedicated to Naganarayana. So this inscription mentions Jirnodhara. Again, the Veraval inscription of Chalukya, Vaghela king, Arjuna, dated 1264 Common Era, mention Churnakaras. Churnakara, the person who whitewashes, lime burner or a whitewashes, among many other terms. The same record also mentions Bhagna, that is broken. Bhagna Vishirna Samarachana. This is what we get the expression. Bhagna Vishirna Samarachana is connected with the conservation. When it is broken, when it is getting dilapidated, it should be reconstructed, renovated. So, Sangor inscription of Yadava, that is Yadava's Mahadevaraya of Shaka 1186, refers to renovation of a temple and causing watershed. Again, Basain stone inscription Mallikarjuna of Shaka 1083 mentions Jirnodharo Kritaha. This one. And two inscriptions of Kalyanpur near Udaipur, Rajasthan, they mention Khandasputita Samarana. Khandasputita Samarana. These are the terms, which do occur. And another very important is Pratikarana. Fragmentary Rashtrakuta inscription of Kandhar of 10th century Common Era refers to Pratikarana. Pratikarana stands for repairs. A small repairs, they used to carry out. So Pratikarana, the term connected with the repairs of the temple. Khandasputita Pratikarana, same as Khandasputita Jirnodhara. So such different expressions do occur connected with the this one. And another little early inscription, a Sharda inscription from Hund, from Kashmir, dated, of course, calligraphically to 8th century Common Era, records the construction of Devakula, or a temple, and the architects Navakarmapati, Jayanti Raja. So Navakarmapati is an architect which we find in this beautiful Sharda inscription. So Jirnodharana, repairs or renovation, conservation, samarachana, repairs, samarana, prakritam samarachana, pratikarana, repairs, kandasputita, pratikarana, kandasputita jirnodhara, navakarman, renovation or repairs, navakarma, the foundation, extension or repairs to building. Navakarmapati, an architect or supervisor, building operations. Navakarmika and Navakarmin. Now, these are the very, very important, interesting term, with the temple architecture. When we speak, we should also try to know how they did and what are the terms, connected with the repairs and conservation. The conservation concept is not something new. Our earlier predecessors, many such examples are there found in inscriptions. Karmantika is a superintendent of work. Gajadhara, I already mentioned Sutradhara. Dashakriya, work of architect who were to look after repairs of temple. Dashakriya is the word. And Chunakara, Sanskrit Chunakara, a lime burner or a whitewasher. Bhagna Vishirna Samarachana, Bhagna Kriya, Bhagna Samskara, repairs. Avachatita, that is the fissures, the cracks, that develop in a temple, or that also we find in inscription. Avachatita, that is cracked, that to be repaired. Whenever some seepage, some crack or fissures which develop in a temple structure, they used to attend these things. That is Kandasputita, Avachatita, Patita, that is fallen. The particular member might have fallen, the temple, the some structure. So they try to restore. Kandaspatita, Avapatita, Samskarartham. That is for the conservation or the repairs of dilapidated, broken, and fallen parts. This is something which is seen in our early inscriptions. Very, very fascinating thing. And let me briefly go through some of the terms. It's though not directly connected with that, but I will give a quick look at some of the terms. Temple rituals, Kumbhabhishekam, Tamil Tiru Kalasha, Mudittal. Kumbhabhishekam, in Tamil they call Tiru Kalasha Mudittal, the consecration ceremony of a temple. Devadroni, this is also a term connected with the temple procession of the images of gods, and township around the temple. Jina Nigama is a term, a township in the possession of Jaina temple, or more probably a Jaina temple, Jina Nagar. A township around the temple is a very interesting thing, and lands associated with the temples. See, you come across Vamana Mudra, even along with Vamana holding a parasol, we called Vamana Mudra, figures of Shankha and Chakra. It is there we find the temple lands, adjacent land, just to demarcate the land, which belong to Vishnu. Vamanakkal, that is especially find, this is associated with the Vishnu temple. If a temple is granted for the maintenance of the temple, we find this boundary stone with Shankha and Chakra, which stands for Vishnu temple. Again, Talavritti is a term which you come across. We can go in detail. There are many such expressions. Endowment of adjoining land granted for the maintenance of the temple, Talavritti, or the deity at the time of its consecration, Talabhoga, Talavataka, and Talapataka. Pataka. These are the different terms connected with that. And Pallichanda, It particularly has a significance. A temple land granted to a Jaina or a Buddhist temple alone, especially when you come across this expression in Tamil inscription, when you come across Pallichanda, it stands for only a land given for a Jaina or Buddhist temple. We come across for Brahminical, we find Devadana or Brahmadeya, but Pallichand is an expression, a land given for Jaina or Buddhist temple. Puja Vritti, that is a tax-free land endowed to a temple for conducting worship. Deva Bhoga, rent-free property of a temple, land given for enjoyment of a temple. Devadaya, Devadana, Devagrahar. So these are the different expressions that come across when we speak of its temple and its establishment. Establishment connected with the temple. Satra, a charitable feeding house, an alms house. We find, Satra is another expression. And the Sri Goshala, Tirukoshalai, a cow shed. Normally, the temple, apart from the garden, they will also have a shed uh, for maintaining cows, which is attached to the temple, Sri Goshalai or Tirukoshalai temple, and Natyashala. Sometimes this may be a part of the temple, or it may be adjunct, a separate structure found around the temple. A dance hall sometimes forms part of the temple structure, also known by Nrittashala or Nritya Mandapa, we come across. Nandanavana is again Tirunandanavanam, a sacred flower garden which is attached to a temple, and this one. And some of the officers or officials, Sthanadhikara, uh, Sthanadhikara, office superintendent of a shrine, Sthanatar, Sanskrit Sanstha, manager of a temple, Sthanika, superintendent or manager of a Tamil, and Thanikarya, director of temple ceremonies. So we many officials, many names occur, but I have tried to collect or those officers who are connected with the temple administration and further activities. I have tried to give Koyil Nayakan, a temple officer, Koyil Sri Karyam, temple officer, Devagarika, the priest or an officer in charge of temples, Devadhyaksha, superintendent of religious foundation, Devanikaya is a temple authorities, Deva Veshma Karana, a department of temples. These are various terms, coming we come across, especially in early medieval temple inscriptions. Dharma Kartru, a temple superintendent, and coming to the architectural members, we find the Pratholi, a gateway or a gate flight of steps or a gateway strongly built, considerably of high. Puja Shila, also called the Shalagrama or Shila, stone emblem of Vishnu, and the Gajamala, row of elephants in the plinth of shrine. So I have tried to give a very wide picture of the not only temple and art architecture and many officials and many things connected with the temple as such.